She had no business being there. Actually, she wasn't even cleared to handle a gun. While Navy SEALs, the most lethal fighters America has ever trained, kept firing shot after shot into nothing but air, completely missing their targets, Evelyn Ward stayed in the rear with a notepad and a pen. Simply an intelligence officer, simply a watcher, simply another person that command had sent to write reports about what the actual fighters accomplished during missions. But when the attack happened, when explosives began raining down, and the SEALs understood they were caught in a trap built specifically to kill them, she did something nobody expected. She put down her notepad, grabbed a weapon nobody knew she owned, and stepped into that deadly valley by herself. Before I reveal what actually took place that day, leave a comment sharing where you're from, and subscribe. Because what Evelyn did next transformed the worst moment in that SEAL unit's existence into something they'd carry with them forever. The helicopter's blades hammered against the sparse mountain atmosphere as it dropped toward the landing area. Through the wide door, rocky terrain spread beneath them in every shade of tan and slate. Valleys that went on forever, carved over centuries by water, mountain ridges that jutted up like shattered bones piercing the horizon, and hidden somewhere in that landscape, an enemy who'd mastered how to turn this ground into a killing field. Staff Sergeant Evelyn Ward occupied a seat near the back ramp, her small build pressed against the helicopter's freezing metal wall. At 32, she possessed the sort of appearance that vanished from memory minutes after you met her. Average looks, dark hair secured in a military standard bun, thin-framed glasses that suggested office work rather than combat. She had on regular battle dress with zero distinctive markings, no special tabs, no jump wings, absolutely nothing that would catch anyone's attention. Resting on her knees sat a reinforced laptop and several field notebooks. Intelligence specialist, her paperwork stated. Watch SEAL unit actions in mountain territory. Record methods, approaches, and standard practices for analysis afterward. Do not interrupt operational leadership. The SEALs hardly noticed she existed. Chief Petty Officer Dylan Cross, leading the team, had given her a quick acknowledgement when she climbed aboard, then immediately refocused on the mission detail. His 8 soldiers, among America's finest elite fighters, stayed concentrated, moving through last-minute gear inspections with the automatic precision that only years of intense preparation could produce. Petty Officer First Class Mason Burke occupied the bench across from Evelyn, his massive frame making the military seating appear toy-sized. He looked her way briefly, then turned toward his buddy. Wonderful. Command sticks us with a paper pusher to observe our work. Like we need somebody scribbling notes while we're fighting to stay alive. His words carried just enough volume to reach her ears. Evelyn showed no reaction, never glanced up from the tablet where she studied terrain maps. She'd experienced all this countless times before. The mockery, the brush-off, the belief that because she held a computer instead of an assault rifle, she didn't deserve field placement. Let them believe whatever helps them, she reminded herself. It simplified everything. The helicopter dropped hard, and everyone grabbed for support as the pilot fought the violent air currents. They approached quickly and close to the ground, using the landscape to hide their arrival. Through the opening, Evelyn watched the valley expanding underneath them. A natural passage squeezed between tall ridges, exactly the type of ground that limited movement and reduced choices. Her vision swept across the view with careful focus, marking the cave openings scattered across the distant slope, the random fields of boulders that could conceal anything, the narrow dirt path snaking through the valley bottom like an old wound. It looked stunning in a brutal, merciless manner. It also made a flawless ambush location. The helicopter settled onto the ground in a massive dust cloud, and the SEALs moved before it fully landed. They poured from the aircraft in combat formation, rifles raised, scanning their areas, efficient and polished. Evelyn held back until they'd secured the perimeter, then collected her equipment and followed. The temperature struck her like a punch. The clock barely showed 8 in the morning, yet the Iraqi heat already felt crushing, heating the stones until they radiated warmth like a furnace. Small dust tornadoes spun across the valley bottom, and the wind arrived in sudden bursts that forced squinting and left grit between your teeth. Chief Cross stood discussing plans with his point man when Evelyn walked over. He acknowledged her with a look that stayed neutral but unwelcoming. Remain near the command group. Don't separate from us, and if combat starts, you drop flat and hold position until we give you clearance. Understood? Completely understood, Chief. Excellent. We have information indicating enemy combatants are operating from these cave systems. Our mission is to watch, confirm identities, and communicate findings. If we get a solid opportunity on priority targets, we have permission to fire. But this mainly stays a reconnaissance operation. Evelyn confirmed with a nod, creating mental records, though she'd already committed the operational instructions to memory. Cross returned his attention to his men, and she moved toward the formation's rear, locating a spot where she could watch without interfering. The team started moving, ascending toward a ridge that would provide oversight of the valley beneath. The landscape fought them, loose rock that shifted with each footfall, jutting formations requiring careful maneuvering, complete vulnerability to anyone observing from higher ground. Yet the SEALs navigated it with trained efficiency, coordinating through silent gestures and minimal radio communication. Evelyn maintained the pace without difficulty, her breathing steady despite the elevation and temperature. She'd operated in mountains previously, many mountains across many nations, whose names never showed up in her official background. Her muscles recalled the pattern of climbing movement, the proper balance between quickness and endurance, the technique for foot placement that reduced sound and maximized balance. They arrived at the ridge after climbing for half an hour. The perspective was both breathtaking and frightening. The valley opened below them like a detailed map, every depression and characteristic obvious in the intense morning brightness. And across from them, carved into the opposite slope, sat the caves, shadowy entrances in the light-colored rock, each potentially hiding anything. The SEAL sniper pair started establishing their position. Petty Officer Second Class Nathan Pierce and his observer, Petty Officer Third Class Alex Ramirez, operated with rehearsed efficiency, setting up their weapon, positioning camouflage materials, computing distances, and air movement. Pierce carried a reputation throughout the teams, responsible for numerous verified eliminations across 3 warzone rotations. If anyone possessed the skill to strike targets at extreme range, he did. Evelyn located a spot behind a small rock structure, retrieved her binoculars, and started her own surveillance. Through the magnification, the valley became layers of information, heat distortion rising from sun-baked stone, plant patterns, indicating water locations, darkness and brightness creating illusions with distance judgment, and the wind. Lord, the wind moved in complex ways. It arrived in gusts from varying directions, spiraling through the valley in sequences that appeared nearly chaotic. She observed dust funnels appear and vanish, followed how the air behaved differently at various heights, registered the heat currents lifting from the darker stone. Contact, Ramirez announced softly. Several fighting-age men 600 meters, traveling between cave system Alpha and Bravo. Through her magnification, Evelyn found them, 5 combatants, assault rifles hanging loosely on their backs, moving with the assurance of people who felt unobserved. They stopped in clear view, conversing, gesturing, totally exposed. Pierce positioned himself behind his weapon, his breathing decreasing as he achieved that focused state all exceptional marksmen develop. Air movement is 2 to 3 miles per hour left to right. Distance 600. Target acquired. His finger applied pressure to the trigger. The muffled crack of the .300 Winchester Magnum sounded sharp but not deafening. Downrange, dirt sprayed up 3 feet before reaching the forward fighter's location. First shot missed, Ramirez reported, surprise clear in his tone. Adjust upward, adjust right. Pierce modified his aim and fired once more. This attempt sent the round sparking off the cliff face 5 feet left of the target. The fighters responded instantly, dispersing with practiced coordination, vanishing into the cave network like vapor. What's happening? Pierce whispered. That placement should have been perfect. From her location, Evelyn watched heat waves dance across her view. The valley functioned as a heat chamber, generating vertical columns of rising atmosphere that distorted light, and critically, distorted the trajectory of projectiles passing through it. The air movement wasn't simply side to side. It existed in 3 dimensions, shifting and dragging in patterns that typical shooting calculations couldn't predict. She remained silent, simply observed, simply recorded information, simply performed her assigned role. The circumstances declined faster than anyone anticipated. Following Pierce's failures, Chief Cross approved a second sniper pair to establish position from an alternate angle. Petty Officer First Class Emma Torres and her observer discovered a location 200 meters north on the ridge, expecting a different viewpoint would produce improved outcomes. Additional targets emerged, encouraged by the unsuccessful attempt. They traveled with growing boldness, some even stopping to scan upward at the ridge, attempting to locate the snipers who'd just revealed their presence. It served as provocation. Fire at us, expend your bullets, show us where you're hiding. Torres took her shot. Her round passed high, impacting the cliff wall above the targets. Pierce fired again, striking low and left, nowhere close to the desired impact point. This makes no sense, Ramirez stated, frustration breaking through his professional control. Our calculations are flawless. The mathematics checks out, yet it feels like shooting through liquid, because that's essentially what's happening. Evelyn understood, heat liquid composed of atmosphere, and temperature and physics that don't follow what you studied in specialized training. Chief Cross crawled toward Pierce's location, his expression tense with worry. Explain the situation. What's occurring? The air movement, Chief. It's constantly changing. Each bullet gets deflected differently. The heat patterns are generating upward and downward current. It's as though the atmosphere is churning. Cross turned to examine the valley, perceiving it differently now, not as landscape but as a tactical challenge without standard solutions. His unit included some of the military's finest marksmen, yet they couldn't strike targets standing practically motionless. That's when the opposition struck back. The initial mortar shell screamed from above and struck 50 meters beneath their location, creating an eruption of dirt and shattered stone. The noise reverberated across the valley, like a thunderclap. Incoming fire, someone yelled unnecessarily. The second shell landed near. The third landed near enough that metal fragments whistled past their position, and Petty Officer Second Class Carlos Mendez cried out as shrapnel tore open his left forearm. They've calculated our position, Burke shouted, already dragging Mendez toward protection. We must relocate. But relocation options didn't exist. The ridge behind them fell away steeply. The path they'd climbed remained exposed to the mortar bombardment. Lateral movement would simply expose them to additional attack vectors. They were trapped and the opposition understood. Rifle fire started cracking across their position. Rounds snapped past heads, sparked against rocks, forced everyone down into whatever shelter they could locate. And the shooting wasn't random. It demonstrated discipline, coordination, covering fire intended to suppress them while the mortars adjusted closer. Pierce attempted another shot, but the incoming fire prevented steady aim. His round went nowhere useful, and he cursed with the frustration of a skilled craftsman whose instruments had suddenly malfunctioned. This feels orchestrated, Cross stated, his voice carrying an edge Evelyn had never detected in a SEAL previous. This seems like a planned trap, as though they anticipated our arrival, because they absolutely did, she understood, analyzing the enemy fire sequence. This isn't improvised, this is rehearsed. They've prepared for this precise situation, how to handle American observation position, how to manipulate the terrain, how to convert our strength into weaknesses. Another mortar, this one struck close enough that the pressure wave hit them like a physical strike. Ramirez collapsed with shrapnel in his thigh, and the medic was already rushing toward him. We're suffering injuries, Cross transmitted on his radio, contacting headquarters, requesting urgent air coverage. We cannot effectively return fire and are immobilized. The radio responded with static. Air coverage arrives in 18 minutes. Can your position hold? 18 minutes felt like 18 years. The enemy assault was growing stronger, not weakening. More combatants appeared, maneuvering through the cave network with the confidence of forces who understood they had their opponents exactly tracked. Evelyn observed everything through her binoculars, her mind recording information, even as the trained soldiers surrounding her fought for survival. She recognized the structure now, 3 connected positions, each supporting the others, establishing overlapping fire that rendered movement suicidal. She observed the mortar crew refining their targeting with accuracy, indicating forward spotters providing adjustment. She observed the leader, a figure who remained back, controlling the engagement with hand signals, and she observed the heat sequences in the valley, the invisible currents of atmosphere that were defeating every American attempt to effectively shoot back. Someone would die if this persisted, likely multiple casualties. The medic already treated his second wounded soldier, and ammunition supplies were dropping toward levels that concerned squad leaders. Evelyn placed down her binoculars with the kind of deliberate care someone might use when making a choice they'd been postponing. Then she reached into her bag and removed something that absolutely didn't belong on any intelligence officer's authorized equipment roster. The weapon looked compact, dark, custom-altered in ways that indicated serious investment and serious intent. A .308 precision weapon, suppressed, with magnification that cost more than most vehicles. The type of tool that existed in an uncertain zone between civilian and military equipment, the kind that serious operators carried when they required serious capability. Burke noticed it initially. His expression showed shock. Ward, what on earth? Where did that come from? You aren't authorized to. She was already shifting, crawling toward a spot at the ridge edge, where the rock structure offered protection from above, yet permitted an unobstructed view of the valley underneath. Chief Cross crawled behind her, his face showing confusion and anger. Ward, cease immediately. You're an intelligence officer, not a shooter. She inspected the weapons chamber with actions that revealed muscle memory carved deep through countless repetitions. Chief, respectfully, I'm attempting to preserve your soldiers' lives. You lack authorization to engage. You're outside the command structure. She settled behind the weapon, face to stock, breathing already regulated. Outside your command structure. That's accurate. Something in her tone made Cross hesitate. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't even self-assurance. It represented the quiet certainty of someone who'd executed this before, who understood precisely what would happen next, and was simply preparing to perform a practice task. Through her magnification, the valley appeared differently than through the binocular. She wasn't viewing terrain or enemy locations. She was interpreting the atmosphere itself, observing how heat distortion bent the background, following patterns in the airborne particles, recognizing which zones remained stable and which filled with heat interference. A wind burst arrived. She sensed it on her skin, measured its duration, anticipated the calm that would come after. In that short window of relative stillness, she took her shot. The suppressed crack barely registered over the continuing battle. Downrange, 450 meters distant, the mortar spotter who'd been directing fire abruptly collapsed forward and remained motionless. Burke, observing through his scope, went completely still. Holy! Did she actually? Evelyn was already finding her following target. She'd spotted the machine gunner establishing position in a cave entrance, arranging himself to deliver suppressive fire that would pin the SEALs while the mortars completed their deadly work. He believed he remained invisible in the darkness. He was mistaken. Her second shot reached him before he could fire a single bullet. The weapon clattered against stone as lifeless hands released it. Ramirez, despite his injured thigh, had his observation scope raised. 2 successful hits, both center target at distances where our shooters couldn't hit anything. Cross stared at Evelyn as though she'd just transformed into something supernatural. Who exactly are you? She didn't respond, couldn't respond actually, because she'd entered that mental state now, the condition where deliberate thinking disappeared and instinct command, where years of preparation and natural ability merged into something that appeared miraculous, but actually just represented skill refined to its absolute peak. Her third target was the combatant, attempting to reach a flanking location. The fourth was the rocket team preparing to strike the SEAL position with explosives. The fifth was another mortar observer, this one positioned farther back, believing distance would ensure safety. It didn't. Each shot demonstrated intention, economy, finality. Where the SEALs had struggled against conditions that defeated their preparation, Evelyn appeared to interpret the valley effortlessly, adjusting for factors they couldn't perceive, scheduling her shots for windows when the heat currents temporarily calmed. The enemy assault started declining, not because they withdrew, but because critical personnel kept vanishing behind accurately placed bullets. The coordinated rhythm of their attack was disintegrating as commanders and experts dropped from the sequence. She's eliminating invisible targets, Pierce whispered, observing through his scope as Evelyn sent a round through smoke and heat distortion to eliminate a fighter who'd been completely hidden from the SEAL positions. That's not possible. Torres, from her location farther on the ridge, had stopped attempting to shoot targets. She simply watched now, analyzing method, attempting to comprehend how someone was achieving shots that contradicted everything she'd learned about shooting science and environmental factors. The enemy leader, the one who'd been managing the battle, made the error of using his radio. The short reflection of metal in the shadows provided everything Evelyn required. The shot measured nearly 600 meters through heat currents that had been defeating marksmen all morning, yet her bullet located him regardless. Without central direction, the attack fell apart. Combatants who'd been operating with coordinated precision started making individual choices driven by panic rather than preparation, and panic made them foreseeable, made them reveal themselves, transformed them into victims instead of danger. They're collapsing, Cross announced, amazement obvious in his words. She's destroying them, the incoming fire reduced to random potshots. The mortars fell silent, and for the first time since the attack started, the SEALs could breathe without anticipating death in the following second. Evelyn lowered her weapon, scanned once more for dangers, identified none. Then she activated the safety and placed the tool carefully alongside her, as though what she'd just accomplished was no more significant than finishing a practice drill. Cross crawled toward her location, his face showing gratitude and total bewilderment. "Ward, Staff Sergeant Ward, I require you to clarify what just occurred." She retrieved a small notebook from her pocket, an actual paper notebook, the type intelligence officers use to document findings, and started writing. "Multiple enemy casualties, attack disrupted, suggest immediate extraction before they reorganize." "That's not my question, and you understand that." His tone was firm, but not hostile. "Who provided your shooting instruction? What unit did you serve with?" She met his gaze, and for just an instant, he recognized something there that made him reconsider every assumption he'd formed about the unassuming woman with the glasses in the laptop. Something cold, something completely professional, something that had witnessed violence on a magnitude that made this morning's firefight appear like a practice exercise. "Intelligence officer," she stated plainly, "exactly as my paperwork indicates." "Nonsense. I've operated with Delta. I've operated with special activities. I've operated with personnel whose organizations lack official names." "What you just did," he gestured helplessly toward the valley where enemy locations now remained quiet. "That wasn't chance. That was elite-level precision shooting under circumstances that were defeating some of the finest marksmen in the armed forces." Evelyn considered this briefly, then returned to her notebook. "Your soldiers performed admirably, Chief. They adjusted to a challenging tactical circumstance. That's what's significant. My soldiers were being destroyed until your soldiers maintained combat. They didn't lose composure. They preserved discipline under assault. That's more valuable than marksmanship." The noise of rotor blades interrupted their exchange. The quick reaction helicopter was approaching, reaching ahead of plan because someone at headquarters had monitored the radio communications and understood the situation had gone from critical to catastrophic. As the aircraft descended for landing, Evelyn started organizing her equipment with methodical efficiency. Laptop secured, notebook stored, and the custom weapon, the one that shouldn't appear on any intelligence officer's gear roster, carefully broken down and stored into a container that resembled camera equipment. Burke approached, his arm wrapped, but operational. He extended a used shell casing, one that had ejected from her weapon during the battle. "You should retain this as a memory." She smiled faintly, the first authentic expression Cross had observed on her face all day. "You retain it. Remember that sometimes the individual you're ignoring is the individual who preserves your life." The official after-action summary was a work of administrative creativity. Official account: SEAL unit faced unexpected opposition. Combined defensive fire and tactical aviation resulted in enemy losses and successful withdrawal. Staff Sergeant Evelyn Ward delivered important intelligence evaluation that supported mission accomplishment. What the summary didn't include: the intelligence officer had eliminated 11 enemy combatants in roughly 8 minutes, destroying an attack that had been deliberately engineered to eliminate American Special Operations personnel, or that her shooting had been so dramatically beyond expectations that Pierce and Torres spent the complete flight back in quiet reflection about their own skill, or that Chief Cross had attempted to obtain information from headquarters about precisely what type of intelligence officer they'd assigned to his unit, only to receive notification that Staff Sergeant Ward's complete service history was restricted at security levels beyond his access. Back at headquarters, Evelyn submitted her findings, participated in the review session, and responded to inquiries with the administrative accuracy of someone who'd had considerable experience avoiding comprehensive explanation. The SEALs executed their assignment under challenging circumstances. She informed the intelligence official examining her documentation. The heat circumstances in that valley generated shooting difficulties that weren't predicted in the preparation stage. Suggest future missions in comparable terrain should incorporate focused preparation on shooting through heat interference. And your personal involvement? I delivered observation and protective fire as required. Normal protocol when a unit faces attack. Your personnel file identifies you as a signals intelligence specialist. It doesn't reference shooting qualification. Evelyn's expression remained unchanged. My personnel file states what it requires to state. The intelligence official studied her for an extended moment, then closed the folder. You're being transferred. Starting now. New assignment will arrive via secure courier. She wasn't shocked. This was standard procedure. You materialized where circumstances required, accomplished what was necessary, then vanished back into whatever administrative obscurity you'd emerged from. The military excelled at making personnel disappear when circumstances demanded it, both enemy combatants and its own service members. That evening, she located Chief Cross on the installation perimeter, observing the mountains where they had nearly perished that morning. "You're departing," he stated without turning. It wasn't speculation. New posting. Where to? Can't disclose. Can't or won't. Both. Cross remained quiet momentarily. "My soldiers are alive because of you. Pierce is alive. Ramirez is alive. Burke, Torres, all of them. They'll always remember that. But they'll also never understand the complete truth, will they? The complete truth is precisely what the documentation states. Your unit faced opposition. You fought through it. Everyone returned home. And the woman who shot as though she'd been practicing it for 2 decades. The intelligence officer, who possessed a custom weapon and achieved impossible shots routinely." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Sometimes the most effective intelligence officers are those who've spent time in operational role. Helps you comprehend what the information actually represents." That's your explanation. It's an effective explanation. Simple. Matches the narrative. Cross turned to face her directly. "I've been in this profession a long time. I've operated with personnel who don't officially exist. Personnel who accomplish things that never officially occur. And I've learned that the most capable ones are those you never anticipate. The ones who appear suited for administrative positions, analyzing information and preparing reports." Sounds quite theatrical, Chief. Am I incorrect? She didn't respond, simply gazed toward the mountains at the skyline, where the sun descended in layers of crimson and amber. "Your soldiers performed quality work today. They maintained composure when circumstances deteriorated. That's what's significant. The remainder is simply administrative detail. Details like the reality that you preserved all our lives. Details like the reality that you have a capable unit who protects each other. Value that. It's less common than you realize." The secure courier reached the installation the following morning, with classified orders. By midday, Evelyn was aboard transport, heading to another assignment in another nation, where she would likely assume another position that had minimal connection to what she actually accomplished. The SEALs observed her departure with a combination of admiration and confusion that would never completely resolve. Burke had the shell casing preserved and displayed in the unit space, not as a prize, but as a lesson that the most capable individuals were frequently the ones you overlooked, the ones you never recognized as formidable, until the instant they decided to demonstrate. Pierce devoted hours investigating long-distance precision shooting through heat interference, attempting to comprehend how she'd accomplished what she'd accomplished. He never completely understood it, but it improved his abilities, so he considered the education worthwhile. And he kept silent about the complete incident, because he comprehended that certain personnel functioned at levels where the regulations differed, where the command hierarchy had extensions that never displayed on official charts, and where the distinction between intelligence officer and operator was sometimes intentionally obscured for reasons that served objectives he didn't require understanding. 5 months afterward, his unit was executing missions in Syria when they obtained intelligence about enemy locations from an intelligence officer attached to another organization. The analysis was thorough, comprehensive, and tactically exceptional, revealing not simply where the opposition was positioned, but how they would respond, what they would attempt, where they would be vulnerable. At the conclusion of the analysis, in the intelligence officer's signature section, was a name he didn't recognize, but the documentation style was recognizable. The observations were the type that only originated from someone who'd experienced time on the dangerous end of combat, and there was a notation in the file information that only someone searching would discover. EW was the contributor. Cross smiled faintly, filed the analysis, and presented his unit on the operation. Somewhere out there, an intelligence officer was ensuring operators remained alive by understanding precisely what they required to know, provided at precisely the optimal moment. And if that intelligence officer occasionally retrieved a weapon and exhibited abilities that extended far beyond information evaluation, well, certain secrets were better left unquestioned, some inquiries were better left unasked, and certain heroes preferred operating in obscurity, accomplishing necessary actions that would never enter official records, because sometimes the most capable individual in any circumstance is the one you're not noticing. The quiet expert, the one recording information in the rear, the one who appears merely present to observe, right until the instant they decide observation ends and action begins. And then you understand that the predator was present throughout. You simply didn't identify it, because it wasn't announcing itself openly. It was positioned quietly observing, anticipating the proper instant to demonstrate to everyone what actual experts accomplish when everything is critical. Years afterward, Pierce would inform new snipers joining the units about the day an intelligence officer outperformed the finest precision marksman in the armed forces. He never mentioned her name, didn't know if he was permitted to, but he always concluded the account identically. The individual who appears least capable might be the most capable individual present, never disregard that. Ramirez kept a photograph from that rotation in the Iraqi mountains. You couldn't locate Evelyn and she had consistently managed to position herself just beyond the frame or facing away when cameras surfaced, but he insisted you could detect her shadow in one area. He preserved it as a reminder that certain Guardian figures wore military boots and possessed weapons instead of wings. Torres eventually reached instructor assignment, preparing the following generation of SEAL marksmen at Naval Special Warfare Preparation Facility. She consistently incorporated a module on shooting through environmental obstacles, heat interference and air patterns that didn't follow textbook expectations. When students inquired where she acquired these methods, she'd smile and respond, "From someone who was superior at it than I'll ever become." And somewhere in another conflict area under another sky, an intelligence officer occupied the rear of a planning space with a computer and notebooks, appearing unremarkable and forgettable while operators prepared their following mission. She listened, documented information, posed quiet inquiries that made everyone consider more carefully about their assumptions. Simply an intelligence officer, simply a watcher, simply someone present to record what the actual fighters accomplished in the field, until the instant arrived when she wasn't. Because the most powerful tool isn't consistently the most obvious one. Sometimes it's the one nobody anticipates until it's already transformed everything. The predator doesn't announce itself to the prey, it simply accomplishes what predators accomplish, quietly and efficiently while everyone else observes somewhere else. Evelyn Ward comprehended this reality better than anyone. She'd constructed a profession on being undervalued, on allowing individuals to perceive what they anticipated to perceive while maintaining her actual capabilities carefully concealed. It was more secure, that approach, for her, and for the individuals she safeguarded. The shell casing Burke had preserved still displayed in the SEAL unit space, cleaned and maintained. Underneath it, someone had inscribed a single term that represented everything they had discovered that day. Respect. Not because she'd required it, not because she'd pursued acknowledgement or recognition, but because she'd earned it in the only measurement that mattered to fighters, by placing herself at risk when it counted most, by accomplishing what required completion when everyone else could, and by vanishing afterward, as though none of it had ever occurred. That's what actual experts accomplish. They materialize, they execute, they depart, and the only proof they were ever present is the reality that individuals who should be deceased are still breathing. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to discover more powerful accounts of courageous women in uniform.